I'm giving you 1 hour, Liam, Umberly Jackson said, her voice steady despite the pain, as she stood in her room, suitcase half-packed, challenging the billionaire Ice King to choose trust over fear. Welcome to a story of courage, betrayal, and love that defies the odds. Where are you listening from today? Share in the comments below and let us know your predictions. Will Liam rise to the challenge, or will his walls of ice hold firm? This tale of Umberly, a stunning black woman who took a job no one wanted, and Liam, the ruthless billionaire, will keep you guessing. Subscribe to our channel to catch our latest stories, each one packed with twists and heart. What secrets lie behind Liam's cold exterior? Can Umberly melt his heart? Dive in and find out. Your thoughts might just shape the journey. The employment office reeked of stale coffee and shattered dreams, its flickering fluorescent lights casting a sickly yellow pallor over the cracked linoleum floor. Umberly Jackson sat in a worn plastic chair, her long, ebony hair cascading over her shoulders like a midnight waterfall, framing a face that turned heads even in her moments of despair. Her beauty was undeniable, high cheekbones, eyes that held both fire and sorrow, and a presence that seemed to demand the world take notice. Yet the world had not. For 3 months, she'd been a ghost in this place, her resume, now soft as tissue from constant folding, clutched in her hands. 5 years of managing a boutique hotel staff, juggling schedules and crises with grace, and a business degree earned through sleepless nights. None of it mattered. Her savings had evaporated, her mother's medical bills loomed like a guillotine, and the eviction notice in her purse burned against her thoughts. Each visit to this office chipped away at her hope. But Umberly was no stranger to fighting for survival. She'd clawed her way through night classes, through whispers of, "You don't belong," in corporate lobbies, through a world that often saw her skin before her strength. Today, she refused to leave empty-handed. The clerk, Mrs. Grayson, sat behind a cluttered desk, her coffee-stained blouse and a perpetual scowl a fixture of Umberly's recent nightmares. She barely glanced up as Umberly approached, her fingers tightening around the resume that felt more like a plea than a qualification. "Still nothing suitable for someone with your limited experience?" Mrs. Grayson said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if Umberly's years of leadership were mere child's play. Umberly's jaw clenched, but she kept her tone even. "There has to be something. I can manage, clean, organize, anything." Mrs. Grayson's eyes flicked up, a glint of something sharp and almost cruel sparking in them. She leaned back, her chair creaking, and slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Well, there is one position. Been open for months. Good pay, too. Live-in household manager for a private estate. $100,000 a year, plus room and board." Umberly's heart leapt, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. It sounded like salvation, a lifeline to pull her from the abyss. "Why hasn't anyone taken it?" she asked, her voice cautious. Mrs. Grayson's smile turned predatory. "Because it's for Liam Caldwell." The name landed like a thunderclap. Everyone in the city knew Liam Caldwell, the billionaire whose blonde hair and piercing blue eyes graced the covers of business magazines, but whose reputation chilled the air. The Ice King, they called him, a man who'd inherited his father's empire and made it colder, sharper, more ruthless. He'd fired entire departments without a blink, raised community centers for glass towers, and churned through household staff like disposable cutlery. Whispers painted him as a perfectionist who thrived on breaking people, a man who demanded the impossible and discarded those who faltered. "The longest anyone's lasted is 3 weeks, Mrs. Grayson continued, her voice almost sing-song now. "Most don't survive the first day. He's particular. Some say he enjoys watching people crack." She leaned forward, her breath sour with coffee. "Between you and me, I think he feeds on their fear." Umberly stared at the paper, the stark black ink spelling out the job's promise. $100,000. Enough to clear her debts, to ease her mother's pain, to finally breathe instead of drown. But the warning was clear. Liam Caldwell was a storm, and his estate was its eye. She thought of her mother's tired voice on the phone saying, "Don't worry, baby, I'll manage," even as hospital bills piled higher. She thought of her apartment, The landlord's threats, the way hunger had become a familiar ache. The smart choice was to walk away, to wait for something safer, something that wouldn't demand her soul. But Umberly had never been one for safe choices. She'd faced worse than a cold billionaire. Prejudice, doubt, a world that tried to shrink her. What was one more challenge? What would you do when the only path forward is through a lion's den? Share your thoughts below. I'll take it, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Mrs. Grayson's eyebrows shot up, a mix of surprise and pity flashing across her face. You sure, honey? I mean, courage is one thing, but this… Umberly cut her off, her resolve hardening like steel. I'm sure. When do I start? Mrs. Grayson shrugged as if washing her hands of the consequences and handed over a contact number. Tomorrow, they'll send a car. Don't say I didn't warn you. The next morning, a sleek black sedan arrived at Umberly's cramped apartment, its polished exterior out of place in her rundown neighborhood. She packed light. 2 suitcases held her world, a few outfits, a photo of her mother smiling in better days, and a small notebook where she jotted dreams she hadn't dared voice aloud. The driver, a grizzled man with kind eyes, glanced at her in the rearview mirror as they pulled away. You're the new one for Caldwell's place, huh? He said, his tone heavy with skepticism. Rather you than me. Umberly forced a smile, her fingers tracing the edge of her suitcase. Is he that bad? The driver's low whistle was answer enough. Bad? No. Cold as a winter grave and twice as unforgiving. Good luck, lady. The Caldwell estate appeared like a mirage, sprawling across 15 acres of manicured perfection, hidden behind iron gates that looked more like fortress walls than decoration. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of modern design. Sharp angles, floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the morning sun like mirrors, and a facade of glass and steel that screamed wealth but whispered isolation. Umberly pressed her face to the car window, her breath fogging the glass. It was beautiful, yes, but in the way a glacier was beautiful. Stunning, untouchable, cold. Could a place like this ever feel like anything but a prison? The driver helped her with her bags, muttering, "Rather you than me," before driving off, leaving her alone at the edge of the abyss. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and a posture that suggested military precision. Ms. Jackson, the woman said, her voice crisp as autumn frost. I'm Ellen Torres, Mr. Caldwell's assistant. Follow me. Umberly stepped into a foyer that could have swallowed her apartment whole, its marble floors gleaming under a chandelier that sparkled like captured stars. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and something sterile, like a hospital. Ellen led her through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines, white walls, silver accents, glass everywhere. But they felt empty, as if no one truly lived here. Mr. Caldwell is particular about his routines, Ellen said, her heels clicking on the floor. You'll learn them quickly or you won't last. She handed Umberly a thick folder. The house rules. Study them. He expects perfection. They climbed a narrow staircase to the staff wing, where Ellen opened a door to a room larger than Umberly's old apartment. It had a plush bed, a private bathroom, and windows overlooking gardens so precise they seemed drawn with a ruler. It's beautiful, Umberly said, meaning it. Ellen's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Mr. Caldwell treats his staff well, if they meet his standards. Her tone implied that it was a rare feat. Your duties include managing the household, scheduling his meals, and ensuring everything runs seamlessly. You'll meet him tomorrow. Get some rest. As Ellen left, Umberly sank onto the bed, the folder of rules heavy in her lap. Through her window, she saw a light flicker in what Ellen had called Liam's study. He was there, the Ice King, just yards away, holding her future in his hands. She thought of her mother, her debts, the dreams she'd buried. This job was her last chance. All she had to do was survive Liam Caldwell. How hard could it be? What risks have you taken for a chance at a better life? Share below. The Caldwell estate stood like a sentinel in the pre-dawn gloom, its glass facade catching the first whispers of light and throwing them back in sharp, unyielding reflections. Umberly Jackson stood at her window in the staff wing, her breath fogging the pain as she gazed out at the manicured gardens below, their hedges trimmed to geometric perfection. The room was a marvel. Plush carpet, a four-poster bed, a bathroom with marble so pristine it seemed to glow, but it felt like a gilded cage. Her two suitcases sat unpacked in the corner, a stark reminder of her precarious foothold in this world of wealth and control. The folder of house rules, a tome of 50 pages, lay open on the desk, its dense instructions a map to surviving the man they called the Ice King. Umberly's long, ebony hair spilled over her shoulders as she traced a finger over the first rule. Mr. Caldwell rises at 5:00 a.m. Coffee, black, no cream, must be ready by 5:15. The clock read 4:30 a.m. Sleep had eluded her, chased away by the weight of what lay ahead. She was no stranger to pressure, but this was different. Liam Caldwell wasn't just an employer. He was a legend, a billionaire whose cold precision had broken lesser souls. Could she withstand him? Have you ever stepped into a place that felt like it could swallow you whole? Share below. She dressed with care, choosing a black blazer and skirt, their edges slightly frayed but pressed to perfection. The outfit was her armor, a reminder of every interview she'd faced, every room where she'd fought to be seen as more than her skin. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman unbroken, her dark eyes fierce with determination, her beauty a quiet defiance against a world that often overlooked her. She tied her hair back, letting a few strands frame her face, and descended the narrow staff staircase, her footsteps muffled on the carpet. The mansion was a labyrinth of silence, its marble floors and soaring ceilings amplifying the faintest sound. The kitchen, a gleaming expanse of chrome and white quartz, awaited her like a stage. Every surface sparkled, every utensil aligned with military precision. Umberly found the coffee maker exactly where Ellen, Liam's assistant, had said it would be, its sleek design intimidating in its perfection. Beside it, a canister of premium beans, their rich aroma a stark contrast to the sterile air. She measured them with care, her hands steady despite the flutter in her chest. This was her first test, and failure was not an option. The rules were relentless. Coffee at 5:15, black, no cream, in the porcelain cup from the second cabinet. Breakfast at 5:45, never repeated within a week. No music during work hours. No personal calls on house lines. No deviation from the schedule. Umberly had memorized them, each word a brick in the wall she'd need to climb to survive. She set the coffee to brew, the machine's soft hum the only sound in the tomb-like silence. As it dripped, she explored the kitchen, opening cabinets to find ingredients for breakfast. The pantry was a study in excess. Organic oats, fresh berries flown in from who knows where, artisanal bread that cost more per loaf than her weekly grocery budget. She settled on steel-cut oats with a berry compote and a slice of toast, simple yet precise, a meal that adhered to the rules while hinting at her capability. The clock ticked closer to 5:15, each second a drumbeat in her ears. She poured the coffee, the dark liquid steaming in the delicate cup, and placed it on a tray, her hands steady but her heart racing. What kind of man demanded such perfection before dawn? What kind of man earned the name Ice King? At 5:16, footsteps echoed on the main staircase, measured and deliberate, like the ticking of a metronome. Umberly straightened, smoothing her blazer, and turned to face the doorway. Liam Caldwell entered, and the air seemed to shift, growing heavier, colder. He was taller than she'd imagined, his blonde hair catching the soft morning light, his blue eyes sharp as cut glass. His tailored suit hugged a frame that spoke of discipline, but there was something else. Lines around his eyes, a faint dishevelment in his hair, as if sleep had been a stranger to him too. He carried an aura of exhaustion beneath his control, a man who ruled his world but paid a price for it. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice low and smooth, devoid of warmth, "I trust you found your accommodations satisfactory." She nodded, extending the tray. "Yes, sir, thank you." Their fingers brushed as he took the cup, his touch cold as marble. He sipped, his gaze never leaving her, assessing her like a ledger he was balancing in his mind. "Ellen briefed you on the morning routine," he said. Not a question but a statement, as if testing her memory. Yes, sir, Umberly replied, her voice calm despite the weight of his stare. Breakfast at 5:45. He moved to the window, his back to her, the cup cradled in his hands. The gardens outside were shrouded in mist, their perfection ghostly in the half-light. You've reviewed the house rules. Another statement, another test. Yes, sir, she said, recalling the litany of demands. No rearranging furniture, the office temperature at exactly 68 degrees. No entering the study without an invitation. She'd memorized them all, their rigidity both a challenge and a comfort. Structure was something she understood, something she could master. Liam turned, his eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossing his face. Most find the rules restrictive. His tone was neutral, but Umberly sensed the trap. She met his gaze, her chin lifting slightly. I find structure helpful, Mr. Caldwell. It clarifies expectations. For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then something shifted in his expression, a ghost of curiosity softening the ice in his eyes. Indeed, he said, almost to himself. He sipped his coffee again, his movements precise, and set the cup down. Breakfast at 5:45, the usual will suffice. He left the kitchen without another word, his footsteps fading into the mansion's vastness. Umberly exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. She'd survived the first encounter, but it felt like stepping onto thin ice, each move a gamble. She turned to the stove, starting the oats, her mind racing. Liam Caldwell was no myth. He was real, complex, a man whose coldness masked something deeper, something she couldn't yet name. The kitchen clock ticked on, a reminder that every second in this house was a test of her resilience. She arranged the berries with care, their vibrant colors a small rebellion against the mansion's sterility. Could she carve a place here, or would the Ice King freeze her out? Have you ever faced a moment where every detail felt like a make-or-break challenge? Share below. As she plated the breakfast, the mansion's silence pressed against her, heavy with expectation. She glanced at the doorway, half expecting Liam to return, but he was gone, retreated to his study or some other corner of his empire. Umberly stood alone in the kitchen, the tray ready, the rules etched in her mind. This was only the beginning, and she knew it. The Ice King's lair was as beautiful as it was unforgiving, and she was a stranger in its heart. But Umberly Jackson was no stranger to fighting for her place. She straightened, her resolve a quiet fire. She'd taken the job no one wanted. Now she'd show Liam Caldwell what she was made of, one perfect cup of coffee at a time. The Caldwell mansion was a cathedral of silence in the pre-dawn hour, its marble corridors swallowing sound like a void. Umberly Jackson moved through the kitchen with the precision of a dancer, her long ebony hair tied back, her black blazer crisp despite its faint signs of wear. The clock on the wall, a sleek chrome sentinel, read 5:10 a.m., and the weight of her first official day pressed against her chest like a stone. She'd memorized Liam Caldwell's rules, 50 pages of exacting demands that governed everything from the temperature of his coffee to the angle of his desk chair. The Ice King, they called him, and today she'd face him not as a shadow glimpsed in a study's light, but as the woman tasked with meeting his impossible standards. The coffee maker hummed softly, its dark brew filling the air with a rich, grounding scent. Umberly poured it into the specified porcelain cup, her hands steady despite the pulse hammering in her throat. This was no ordinary job. This was survival. Have you ever faced a moment where one mistake could unravel everything? Share below. The kitchen gleamed, its chrome surfaces reflecting her silhouette like a mirror. Every detail was a test. The coffee, black, no cream, ready by 5:15, breakfast at 5:45, never the same dish twice in a week. She'd chosen steel-cut oats with a fresh berry compote and whole-grain toast, simple yet elegant, a meal that adhered to the rules while showcasing her care. The berries, plump and vibrant, were a quiet rebellion against the mansion's sterile perfection, their colors a whisper of life in a house that felt more like a mausoleum. Umberly arranged the tray with meticulous precision, aligning the spoon just so, ensuring the napkin's fold was flawless. The rules were clear. Liam Caldwell forgave no errors. She glanced at the clock. 5:14, 1 minute to go. Her breath caught as she heard footsteps, measured and deliberate, descending the main staircase. Each step was a drumbeat, announcing the arrival of the man who held her future in his cold, calculating hands. Liam Caldwell entered at exactly 5:16, his presence filling the kitchen like a storm rolling in. His blonde hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd run his hands through it in a rare moment of disarray, but his tailored suit was impeccable, hugging a frame that spoke of discipline over indulgence. His blue eyes, sharp as winter ice, swept over her with the efficiency of a machine taking inventory. Up close, he was taller than she'd imagined, his height commanding the space. Yet there was something else, a faint shadow of exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, a weariness that belied the myth of the untouchable Ice King. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice low and smooth, devoid of warmth but not unkind. "I trust you've settled in." She nodded, extending the tray, her fingers brushing his as he took the cup. His touch was cold, like marble, and she fought the urge to shiver. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He sipped the coffee, his gaze never leaving her, studying her over the rim of the cup as if she were a puzzle he hadn't yet solved. The silence stretched, taut and heavy, each second a test of her composure. Umberly stood tall, her posture steady, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. She'd faced worse than scrutiny, boardrooms where her presence was questioned, whispers that doubted her worth. This was just another battle, and she was armed with resilience. "Ellen briefed you on the morning routine," he said, not a question but a probe, testing her recall. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice calm. "Breakfast at 5:45. He turned to the window, his back to her, the cup cradled in his hands as he gazed out at the gardens, still shrouded in morning mist. The light caught his profile, softening the hard lines of his jaw, and for a moment he seemed almost human. "You've reviewed the house rules," he continued, his tone neutral, but laced with something sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. Umberly nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Yes, sir." She'd memorized every word. No music during work hours. No personal calls on house lines. Office at 68 degrees. No entering the study without an invitation. The rules were a fortress, designed to keep chaos at bay, and she understood their purpose. Structure was her ally, a framework she could navigate. Liam turned, his eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of curiosity, or was it doubt, crossing his face. "Most find the rules restrictive," he said, his voice testing her, daring her to falter. Umberly lifted her chin, her gaze steady. "I find structure helpful, Mr. Caldwell. It removes ambiguity." The words were simple, but they carried her defiance, her refusal to be intimidated by his reputation. For a heartbeat, something shifted in his expression. A spark of surprise, perhaps, or the faintest hint of approval. "Indeed," he said almost to himself, and took another sip of coffee. Then, as if flipping a switch, he set the cup down, his movements precise. "Breakfast at 5:45. The usual will suffice." He paused at the doorway, his back still to her, and added, "Lunch, something unexpected." The words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in indifference. Umberly's heart skipped, but she kept her voice even. "Of course, sir." He left without another word, his footsteps fading into the mansion's vastness, leaving her alone with the echo of his command. Something unexpected. It wasn't just a request. It was a gauntlet thrown at her feet, a test of her creativity, her nerve, her ability to survive the Ice King's scrutiny. Umberly exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since she'd woken. The coffee had been perfect, the first hurdle cleared, but lunch was a different beast. She moved to the pantry, her mind racing as she surveyed the ingredients. The rules forbade repetition, demanded precision, but unexpected gave her room to breathe, to show who she was. She pulled out quinoa, roasted figs, a bottle of balsamic glaze, bold flavors that could dance together without breaking the bank of Liam's expectations. She envisioned a salad, vibrant and textured, a dish that was both refined and daring, a reflection of her resilience. As she chopped and measured, Her hands moved with purpose, but her thoughts swirled. What did Liam Caldwell want? Control, certainly, but was there more? The exhaustion in his eyes, the faint disarray in his hair, hints of a man beneath the myth. Could she reach him, or would he freeze her out? The clock ticked toward 5:45, and Umberly arranged the breakfast tray. Oats steaming, berries glistening, toast golden. She carried it to the dining room, a cavernous space with a table long enough for 20, but set for one. Liam was already there, reading a tablet, his posture rigid. She set the tray down, her movements silent, and stepped back, watching as he ate. He didn't speak, didn't look up, but his nod was subtle, a silent acknowledgement that she'd passed the morning's test. As she cleared the dishes, he rose, tablet in hand. "The cleaning service arrives at 9:00, he said. "Ensure they focus on the guest wing. I'm expecting visitors soon." Umberly nodded. "Yes, sir. For lunch?" He paused, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since the coffee. "Surprise me," he said, and the weight of the word landed like a stone. He left, and Umberly stood alone, the dining room's silence pressing against her. She'd survived the morning, but lunch would be her true proving ground. Could she surprise a man who seemed to expect perfection and nothing else? Have you ever faced a challenge that demanded you be more than you thought you could be? Share below. The Caldwell mansion exhaled a sterile hush as Umberly Jackson glided through its pristine halls, her footsteps barely a whisper on the marble floors. On her third day, the weight of Liam Caldwell's rules clung to her like a second skin. Yet the kitchen's chrome gleam and the morning's perfect coffee had earned her a fragile foothold in this icy domain. The Ice King's challenge from yesterday, "Surprise me," still echoed in her mind, her quinoa and fig salad having drawn a rare nod of approval. But today felt different, heavier, as if the mansion itself held its breath, waiting for her to falter. Umberly's long, ebony hair swayed loosely, a quiet defiance against the rigid order of the house. She'd survived Liam's scrutiny, but survival wasn't enough. She wanted to leave a mark. As she moved through the living room, her eyes caught on a grand piano, its black lacquer surface dulled by a thin veil of dust. The sight stopped her cold, a memory stirring, her mother's hands on their old upright, coaxing out melodies that warmed their tiny apartment. Could music pierce this mansion's chill? Have you ever found something that felt like a bridge to your past? Share below. The piano stood like a forgotten relic, its presence jarring in the mansion's sterile perfection. Sheet music rested on the stand. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, yellowed and untouched, as if it had been abandoned mid-note. Umberly's fingers itched, drawn to the keys as if by instinct. The house rules were clear: no music during work hours. But the morning's tasks were done. Coffee served, breakfast cleared, the cleaning service not due for hours. She glanced around, the silence oppressive, and sat at the bench, her heart pounding. Her fingers brushed the ivory keys, cool and smooth, and she began to play. The opening notes of Moonlight Sonata spilled into the room, tentative at first, then growing bolder, their melancholy beauty filling the air like a warm breath. Each chord was a memory of her mother humming in their cramped kitchen, of lessons paid for with sacrifices Umberly hadn't understood as a child. The music felt alive, a rebellion against the mansion's cold order. And for a moment, she was no longer just the household manager. She was Umberly, the woman who carried her mother's love in her fingertips. "Are you a musician, Miss Jackson?" The voice, low and commanding, cut through the melody like a blade. Umberly's hands froze, the notes dying abruptly. Liam Caldwell stood in the doorway, his blonde hair catching the morning light, his blue eyes unreadable, but fixed on her with unnerving intensity. He'd moved silently like a predator, his tailored suit as immaculate as ever. Yet there was a tension in his posture, as if the music had caught him off guard. Umberly's pulse raced. She'd broken a rule, a cardinal sin in this house. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, rising from the bench, her hands trembling. "I didn't mean to." He raised a hand, silencing her. "Answer the question." His tone was quiet, but it carried the weight of authority, daring her to lie. She took a breath, meeting his gaze. "I played as a child. My mother insisted on lessons, even when we couldn't afford them. She said music fed the soul. Liam stepped into the room, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug. The air seemed to shift, charged with something new, curiosity perhaps, or something deeper. And do you believe that? That music feeds the soul? The question felt loaded, a test wrapped in velvet. Umberly hesitated, her mind racing. She could deflect, play it safe, but something in his eyes, those glacial blue depths, urged her to speak truthfully. I think music has power, she said, her voice steady despite the risk. It can heal, connect, say what words can't. He moved closer, his cologne crisp, expensive, with a hint of cedar, filling the space between them. Play something, he said, his voice soft but commanding, like a king issuing a decree. Umberly's breath caught. Sir, I haven't played in years. He tilted his head, his gaze unrelenting. I'm amending the rules. Play. Her hands trembled as she sat back down, her mind a whirl of choices. Something technical to prove skill? Something safe to avoid judgment? Instead, her fingers found Moonlight Sonata. Again, its haunting melody flowing from memory. The notes were imperfect. Her fingers stumbled over passages once smooth. But they carried an honesty that filled the room, transforming its sterile perfection into something alive. The music wove a spell, softening the sharp edges of the mansion, and Umberly lost herself in it, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. Play with your heart, Umberly. Let it speak. When the final note faded, the silence was different, charged, intimate, as if the room itself had exhaled. She turned to Liam, bracing for criticism, expecting the Ice King to find fault. Instead, he stood motionless, his eyes locked on her, and for the first time, she saw something unguarded, a flicker of vulnerability, a crack in his icy facade. My mother used to play that song, he said quietly, the words hanging between them like a confession. For a heartbeat, he wasn't the billionaire who broke people. He was a man haunted by a memory, his voice carrying a weight Umberly couldn't yet name. She held his gaze, her heart pounding. It must have been beautiful, she said softly, not daring to push further. He nodded almost imperceptibly and turned away, his mask slipping back into place. Lunch in 2 hours, he said, his tone brisk again. Something surprising, as I requested. He left, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Umberly alone with the piano and the echo of his words. She exhaled, her hands still trembling on the keys. She'd broken a rule and survived, but more than that, she'd glimpsed the man beneath the myth. The moment felt fragile, like a spark that could either ignite or be snuffed out. She rose, returning to the kitchen, her mind already turning to lunch. Liam's challenge, something surprising, was a gauntlet she couldn't ignore. She opened the pantry, her eyes scanning the ingredients with new purpose. Citrus-infused salmon, herb risotto, a drizzle of lemon oil, something bold, refined, a dish that spoke of care without breaking the rules. As she chopped herbs, their sharp scent grounding her, she thought of Liam's words. My mother used to play that song. There was pain there, a wound he guarded fiercely. Could she reach him through her work, her presence, her refusal to cower? The kitchen clock ticked on, a reminder that every moment in this house was a test. Umberly plated the lunch with care, the salmon glistening, the risotto creamy and fragrant. She'd survived the piano, but lunch was another battlefield. Could she surprise a man who seemed to expect nothing but perfection? Have you ever taken a risk that revealed something unexpected about someone? Share below. As she set the tray in the dining room, the mansion's silence pressed against her. But it felt different now. Not oppressive, but expectant. Liam would sit at his solitary table, eat her food, and judge her work. But the piano had changed something, however small. Umberly straightened, her resolve a quiet fire. She wasn't just here to survive the Ice King. She was here to challenge him. One note, one meal, one moment at a time. The Caldwell mansion thrummed with a deceptive calm, its polished surfaces reflecting the morning light like a mirror hiding secrets. Umberly Jackson moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, her long ebony hair swaying as she prepared Liam Caldwell's mid-morning coffee. The routine now as familiar as her heartbeat, The Ice King's world was one of precision, and she'd begun to navigate it, her carefully crafted meals and quiet defiance earning her a fragile place in his domain. But the air felt charged today, as if the mansion itself sensed an approaching storm. Umberly's dark eyes flickered to the clock, 10:01 a.m., as she arranged a tray with a fresh pot of coffee and a plate of almond biscotti, a subtle nod to Liam's unspoken preference for something crisp with his second cup. She'd learned to read the small cues, the way his shoulders relaxed slightly when the coffee was just right, the faint pause before he left the dining room. Yet the memory of the piano lingered, a crack in his icy facade that made her wonder what lay beneath. Could she trust that moment of vulnerability, or was it a trap waiting to spring? Have you ever sensed a storm brewing in a quiet moment? Share below. The silence was shattered with a laugh, bright, musical, and sharp as breaking glass. It echoed through the marble foyer, slicing through the mansion's stillness like a blade. Umberly froze, the tray balanced in her hands as the sound drew closer, accompanied by the click of high heels and a voice dripping with confidence. "James, darling, I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." The woman who swept into the kitchen was a vision of calculated perfection. Tall, blonde, her hair cascading in flawless waves, her designer silk dress clinging to a figure that seemed sculpted for magazine covers. Vanessa, Liam's ex, radiated a beauty that was both breathtaking and cruel, her green eyes scanning the room with the assurance of someone who'd never doubted her welcome. Umberly's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the tray. This was no ordinary visitor. This was a predator in silk, and the mansion felt smaller in her presence. Liam followed, his blonde hair catching the light, his blue eyes guarded, but his jaw tight with tension. His tailored suit was as impeccable as ever, but his hands were clenched, betraying a flicker of unease. "Vanessa," he said, his voice low and edged with warning, like a man bracing for battle. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa's laugh rang out again, careless and cutting, as her gaze landed on Umberly. "Oh, you must be the new help," she said, her tone dismissing Umberly as if she were a smudge on the counter. The word help stung, a deliberate barb meant to diminish. Umberly's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral, setting the tray down with deliberate care. She'd faced worse, snide remarks in corporate lobbies, eyes that judged her before she spoke. She wouldn't crumble now. "Ms. Jackson is my household manager," Liam said, his voice sharpening, a steel blade unsheathed. The air grew heavy, charged with an unspoken history. Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed, appraising Umberly like a rival. "Of course she is," she said, her tone laced with mockery. "How quaint. After the disasters with the last few, I suppose you had to scrape the bottom of the barrel." The words hit like a slap, but Umberly kept her gaze steady, focusing on the biscotti, aligning them perfectly on the plate. She wouldn't give Vanessa the satisfaction of a reaction. Liam stepped forward, his posture shifting, predatory now, like a lion guarding its territory. "That's enough, Vanessa," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're out of line." Vanessa's composure flickered, her perfect smile tightening. "What? I'm just saying what everyone thinks." She tossed her hair, the gesture practiced, dismissive. "You've always had a knack for picking up strays, Liam." Umberly's hands trembled slightly as she poured the coffee, the dark liquid steaming in the silence. She felt the weight of Vanessa's words, the implication that she was less than, unworthy of this space. But Liam's response was swift, cutting. "You're saying things that aren't welcome in my house." He moved closer to Vanessa, his presence towering, his eyes cold as winter. "I think you should leave." Vanessa's laugh faltered, her eyes darting between Liam and Umberly, something ugly flickering in their depths. "James, you can't be serious. We have history." "We have nothing," Liam said, his voice like stone, each word a hammer strike. "We had nothing when you left me to grieve my father alone, chasing his will instead of standing by my side. I made that clear when I asked you to leave last time." The silence that followed was deafening, a chasm opening between them. Vanessa's face paled beneath her flawless makeup, her confidence cracking like thin ice. "That's not fair," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "You were hurting. You weren't thinking clearly. Liam's eyes darkened, his hands clenching tighter. I was thinking perfectly clearly. I saw you for what you were. Someone who loved the Caldwell name, not the man carrying it. Helen will show you out. Vanessa's gaze snapped to Umberly, her smile twisting into something venomous. I see you've replaced me with the help. How democratic of you. Umberly's heart pounded, but she kept her hands steady, placing the coffee pot down with deliberate calm. Liam's voice was ice now, unyielding. I haven't replaced you with anyone. There was nothing to replace. The finality of his words hung in the air, a verdict delivered. Vanessa's composure shattered, her eyes flashing with something raw, anger perhaps, or desperation. She turned on her heels clicking furiously as Helen appeared to escort her out, leaving a wake of silence that felt like the aftermath of a storm. Umberly stood frozen, the tray untouched, the biscotti a forgotten offering. The kitchen, once her sanctuary, felt like a battlefield, the air thick with the ghosts of Liam's past. He remained by the window, his back rigid, his hands still clenched. She wanted to speak, to bridge the chasm Vanessa had opened, but the rules held her back. No personal conversations, no overstepping boundaries. Yet Liam's defense of her had been fierce, unexpected, a crack in his icy armor that made her heart ache. She cleared her throat softly, setting the tray on the counter. Coffee's ready, Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. He turned, and for a moment, she saw something broken in his eyes, a pain that mirrored her struggles. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual control. It's fine, Umberly said, though the lie tasted bitter. She busied herself with the tray, avoiding his gaze. It's not, he said, stepping closer, his cologne crisp with a hint of cedar, filling the space between them. Vanessa has a way of bringing out the worst in people. Umberly paused, her hands stilling. She brought out the best in you, she said before she could stop herself. He looked at her sharply, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? She met his gaze, her courage rising. You defended me. You didn't have to. You could have let her words slide, but you didn't. The air grew heavy, charged with unspoken truths. Liam's eyes searched hers, and for a heartbeat, the Ice King was gone, replaced by a man who'd fought for her dignity. She was wrong about you, he said softly. I don't tolerate cruelty in my house. Umberly nodded, her throat tight. Thank you, sir. He turned back to the window, but the moment lingered, a spark in the mansion's cold heart. Have you ever been defended when you felt invisible? Share below. As Umberly returned to her tasks, the kitchen felt different, warmer, as if Liam's stand had shifted something fundamental. She prepared to serve the coffee, her mind racing. Vanessa's shadow loomed, but Liam's defense was a light piercing the gloom. Could she trust it, or was it another test in the Ice King's game? The Caldwell mansion, usually a bastion of icy calm, vibrated with an undercurrent of dread as Umberly Jackson moved through its gleaming corridors. The kitchen, her domain of carefully curated meals and precise routines, felt like a fortress under siege. Liam Caldwell's world, governed by his unyielding rules, had been rattled by Vanessa's venomous visit, but Umberly had glimpsed something human in his fierce defense of her, a crack in the Ice King's armor. Now, as she prepared his mid-morning coffee, her long ebony hair tied back, her dark eyes alert, she sensed a new tension in the air, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. The clock read 2:45 a.m., an hour unnatural for any task, but a commotion had shattered the mansion's silence. Liam's voice, sharp and commanding, echoed from his study, slicing through the night like a blade. What do you mean the Singapore deal is off? That's impossible. Umberly paused, her hands hovering over the coffee pot, her heart quickening. Something was wrong. Wrong. Have you ever felt a crisis brewing in the dead of night? Share below. She slipped into her robe, her bare feet silent on the cold marble as she padded to her door, drawn by the urgency in Liam's tone. His voice carried through the halls, each word laced with controlled fury. No, Davidson, you listen to me. This company has been bleeding money while you've been playing politics. A crash followed. A book, perhaps, or a paperweight. its impact reverberating through the mansion's sterile walls. Umberly's breath caught, her instincts urging her to stay out of sight, but her role as household manager demanded she be ready for anything. She returned to the kitchen, her mind racing as she brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the rich aroma a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. The rules were clear. Anticipate Mr. Caldwell's needs. If a crisis were erupting, she'd ensure the house was prepared, no matter the hour. By dawn, the mansion had transformed into a war zone. Sleek black cars lined the circular drive, disgorging men in expensive suits, their faces grim, briefcases clutched like shields. Umberly moved like a ghost, her black skirt and blazer a quiet uniform of efficiency, ensuring coffee stayed hot and documents were copied with precision. The dining room, once Liam's solitary domain, now buzzed with executives, their voices low and urgent. Words like market manipulation and SEC investigation falling like stones into still water. Umberly caught fragments as she refilled carafes. Insider trading allegations, hostile takeover, leaked documents. Each phrase tightened the knot in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral, her hands steady. She'd faced pressure before, corporate lobbies, skeptical bosses. But this was different. This was Liam Caldwell's empire teetering, and she was a cog in its machinery, invisible yet essential. Liam stood at the center of the storm, his blonde hair catching the light, his blue eyes cold as steel. He commanded the room with a presence that silenced even the most seasoned executives, his voice cutting through their murmurs like a scalpel. "We need answers, not excuses," he snapped, his hands steady but his shoulders rigid, betraying a tension Umberly hadn't seen before. She noticed the small signs, the way his fingers twitched when he thought no one was watching, the hollow exhaustion in his eyes as he pored over reports. The Ice King was unshakable, but the man beneath was fraying. Umberly moved silently, placing a fresh coffee cup at his side, her presence a quiet anchor in the chaos. He didn't acknowledge her, but his hand paused briefly, a silent thank you she'd learned to recognize. The front door opened, and a familiar laugh, bright, cutting, and unwelcome, sliced through the tension. Vanessa swept in, her blonde hair a cascade of calculated perfection, her designer suit a vibrant red that demanded attention. Behind her trailed a man Umberly didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, with a predatory smile that made her skin crawl. "James, darling," Vanessa called, her voice ringing like a bell. "I came as soon as I heard. Such terrible news about the Singapore investigation." Umberly, arranging a lunch tray in the dining room, froze, her heart sinking. Vanessa's presence was no coincidence. It was a calculated strike. Liam's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face her. "What do you want, Vanessa?" he said, his tone icy, a warning she either missed or ignored. "To help, of course," Vanessa purred, her smile as sharp as glass. "This is Charles Wentworth from Morrison and Associates. They specialize in corporate crisis management." Charles extended a hand, his smile slick as oil, but Liam didn't take it. "I have lawyers," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Vanessa's laugh was dismissive. "Not like Charles. He's creative. He makes problems disappear." Her gaze flicked to Umberly, lingering with a triumphant glint, as if she were a cat toying with a mouse. Umberly kept her focus on the tray. Sliced avocados, poached eggs, artisanal bread, her hands steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. Vanessa's presence was a challenge, a reminder of the hierarchy Umberly was meant to stay beneath. But she wouldn't flinch. Not here, not now. The conversation moved to Liam's office, the door closing with a soft thud, but not before Umberly caught Vanessa's parting glance. Smug, possessive, a promise of trouble. She continued her work, setting the dining table for the executives, her mind racing. The Singapore deal, worth hundreds of millions, was dead, and the SEC's investigation was expanding, probing transactions that could unravel Liam's empire. Whispers among the executives hinted at a leak, someone with access to sensitive documents. Umberly's role was to keep the house running, but the weight of the crisis pressed against her, a reminder of her precarious place in this world. She overheard a lawyer mutter, The leak came from inside, someone close to Caldwell. The words sent a chill down her spine, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the lunch. She'd chosen a light spread, quinoa bowls with roasted vegetables, a nod to Liam's preference for variety. Each dish a small act of defiance against the chaos. As she carried the tray to the dining room, Ellen appeared, her silver hair as severe as ever, her face pale. "Ms. Jackson," she whispered, pulling Umberly aside. "They're saying it could be criminal charges. The leak involved documents from Liam's private study." Umberly's heart stuttered. "His study? But the rules?" Ellen cut her off, her voice low. "Exactly. Only a few have access. And you're the newest." The implication hung heavy, a shadow cast by Vanessa's earlier smirk. Umberly's mind raced. She'd never entered the study, had followed every rule to the letter. Yet the accusation lingered, a trap waiting to spring. "They need someone to blame," Ellen said, her eyes filled with pity. "Be careful." Umberly nodded, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't let whispers undo her. But as she returned to the kitchen, the mansion felt darker, its walls closing in. Vanessa's shadow loomed, and the storm was far from over. Have you ever felt the weight of suspicion in a crisis? Share below. The Caldwell mansion, once a bastion of cold order, now thrummed with the chaos of whispered accusations and corporate collapse. Umberly Jackson stood in the kitchen, her long ebony hair pulled back, her hands steady as she polished a silver tray, though her heart pounded like a war drum. The air was thick with the fallout of the Singapore deal's failure, the SEC's investigation casting a shadow over Liam Caldwell's empire. Vanessa's smug arrival with Charles Wentworth had set Umberly's nerves on edge, their presence a calculated strike amid crisis. She'd kept the house running, coffee hot, lunch served, documents copied. But the weight of suspicion hung heavy. Whispers of a leak from Liam's private study had turned heads, and Umberly, the newest in his inner circle, felt the eyes of judgment. As she arranged a platter of sandwiches for the executives, a chill ran through her. Could she be the scapegoat in this storm? Have you ever felt suspicion closing in like a trap? Share below. Ellen's warning still echoed. They need someone to blame. Umberly's dark eyes flicked to the kitchen clock, 3:00 p.m. As she moved silently, her black blazer a shield against the growing unease. The dining room buzzed with tense voices, fragments of insider trading, and criminal charges slicing through the air. She'd adhered to every rule, never setting foot in Liam's study, yet the accusation lingered like a specter. As she refilled a carafe, Ellen appeared, her silver hair stark against her pale face. "Miss Jackson," she whispered, pulling Umberly into a corner. "They're pointing fingers. Vanessa and Wentworth claim you visited their law firm last week, signed in as U. Jackson. They have logs." Umberly's breath caught, her hands clenching. "That's impossible. I've barely left the estate." Ellen's eyes held pity. "Appearances matter. You're the newest, the easiest target." Before Umberly could respond, Liam's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. "Ms. Jackson, I need to speak with you. Alone." Ellen vanished, leaving Umberly facing the Ice King across the kitchen island, their morning ritual of coffee now a distant memory. Liam stood tall, his blonde hair catching the light, his blue eyes cold but brittle, as if holding back a storm. His suit was impeccable, but his hands trembled slightly, betraying a crack in his control. "Is it true?" Umberly asked, her voice quiet but firm, though her heart raced. "Are they saying I leaked those documents?" Liam's gaze was unrelenting, searching her face for a flaw. "Some are suggesting that possibility," he said, his tone measured, each word a stone laid in a wall between them. Umberly's chest tightened, the betrayal cutting deeper than Vanessa's barbs. "You know I didn't," she said, her voice steady despite the ache. "I've never been in your study. The rules forbid it." Liam leaned closer, his cologne crisp, cedar-laced, filling the space, his eyes narrowing. "You've had access to my home, my routines, my private conversations. You've seen my schedule, my habits." The word habits landed like a slap, twisting their fragile moments. the piano, his nod at her meals, into something sinister. "You think I use that against you?" she asked, her voice rising despite her effort to stay calm. "You think I'd betray you?" Liam's jaw tightened, his hands clenching. "You were desperate when you came here. Facing eviction, medical bills. Desperate people can be tempted." The accusation was a dagger, and Umberly felt it twist. "You're saying I sold you out," she said, her voice low, trembling with hurt. "Wentworth's firm found a log. Someone signed in as you, Jackson, last week." Umberly's blood ran cold. "I've never been to any law firm. You know where I've been. Here, following your rules, making your coffee, keeping your house." Liam's eyes searched hers, but doubt lingered, a shadow she couldn't dispel. "Then you won't mind if we search your room," he said, his voice cold. "Final. Your phone, your accounts." Umberly's heart sank, the betrayal absolute. "You want to treat me like a criminal." Liam's expression didn't soften. "I want to protect my company, my future. I want to do what I should have done from the start. Trust no one." "Did you?" Liam's question was barely a whisper, his eyes searching hers, raw and vulnerable. "Did you fool me?" Umberly looked at him, really looked. The exhaustion in his face, the fear eating him alive, the man hiding behind the Ice King's mask. "No," she said, her voice steady despite the tears she refused to shed. "What I felt was real. But that doesn't matter when you choose fear over trust." She stepped back, her resolve hardening. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted. I'll pack. Helen can search my room, my phone, whatever you need to clear my name. But I'm done here." Liam's mask slipped, his eyes wide with something like panic. "I never said you weren't wanted." Umberly's laugh was bitter, hollow. "You didn't have to. Your silence says it all." She turned to leave, but shouts erupted from the foyer, male voices angry, overlapping. Umberly paused, her hand on the doorframe, as Liam's voice cut through the chaos. "What do you mean by fabricated evidence?" She crept closer, listening despite herself. "The security footage from Wentworth's firm." "It's doctored," a voice said. "Timestamps show last week, but the metadata says it was created yesterday. Someone used social media photos to frame Ms. Jackson." Umberly's heart leapt, vindication warring with pain. Vanessa's voice, sharp and defensive, broke in. "This is ridiculous. Why would anyone go to such lengths?" Liam's response was deadly quiet. "Because the real leak came from someone with access to my study, my schedule, someone who knew when I'd be distracted." Umberly's breath caught as Liam continued, his voice ablade. "Charles, explain how you knew Ms. Jackson had access to my study when the rules forbade it." Silence fell, heavy and damning. "The only people with keys are Helen, me, and my ex-girlfriend, who's been absent during the Singapore talks, giving me space." Umberly heard papers rustle, then Liam's command, "Helen, show Mr. Wentworth and Ms. Vanessa out." Vanessa's protest was shrill, but Liam's voice was unyielding. "The biggest mistake I made was accusing an innocent woman instead of trusting what I knew to be true." Umberly's hands stilled on her suitcase, her heart pounding. Through her window, she saw Vanessa storming to a car, her composure shattered, Wentworth trailing behind, his face grim. Helen knocked softly. "Ms. Jackson, Mr. Caldwell wants to speak with you." Umberly closed her suitcase, her voice firm. "Tell him I'm busy." Helen's eyes softened. "He was wrong, Umberly. He's scared, but he's learning. Give him a chance." Umberly looked at her, the woman who'd seen Liam's walls rise. "I'll give him 1 hour," she said. "If he wants to try, he knows where to find me." The door closed, leaving Umberly alone, the weight of truth and betrayal heavy in the air. Could Liam choose trust over fear? Have you ever faced a moment where trust hung in the balance? Share below. The Caldwell mansion, once a fortress of icy control, held its breath in the late afternoon light, its glass walls reflecting a world on the brink of change. Umberly Jackson stood in her room in the staff wing, her long ebony hair loose, cascading over her shoulders as she folded the last of her clothes into her suitcase. The betrayal of Liam Caldwell's accusations still burned, a wound deepened by the trust she'd begun to offer him. Yet the truth had surfaced, Vanessa and Charles Wentworth's fabricated evidence exposed, their plot to frame her unraveled. Liam's voice, sharp with realization, had echoed through the foyer, banishing them from his life. Now Umberly had given him 1 hour to decide if he could choose trust over fear, love over solitude. The clock on her nightstand ticked mercilessly, each second a pulse in the silence. 53 minutes had passed, and the door remained still. Could the Ice King shed his armor, or would she leave this house as she'd entered it, alone, but unbroken? Have you ever waited for someone to choose you over their fears? Share below. Umberly sat on the edge of the bed, her black blazer discarded, her hands folded in her lap. The room, with its plush carpet and garden views, felt like a paradox. Beautiful, yet temporary, a place she dared to imagine as hers. She thought of the piano, the moonlight sonata that had drawn a confession from Liam, the meals she'd crafted to surprise him, the moments when his blue eyes softened, revealing a man beneath the myth. She'd seen him, truly seen him, and that vision had cost her. Her heart ached, not just for the job she'd lose, but for the fragile connection she'd believed in. The suitcase lay open, a testament to her resolve. She'd survived worse than Liam Caldwell, corporate dismissals, whispered prejudices, a world that tried to dim her light. But this hurt differently, a wound of hope betrayed. A soft knock shattered her thoughts, tentative, unlike the commanding presence she'd grown to expect. Umberly's breath caught, her heart hammering as she called, "Come in." Liam entered, his blonde hair disheveled, his tailored suit slightly askew, as if he'd been pacing. His blue eyes, usually sharp as glaciers, were raw, stripped of their icy veil. He looked younger, vulnerable, a man standing on the edge of a precipice. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, each word heavy with effort. Umberly stood, her dark eyes searching his face, wary but open. "About what?" she asked, her tone steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. Liam took a step closer, his hands loose, no longer clenched in defense. "About the first time you played Moonlight Sonata. Do you know why I asked you to play?" She shook her head, the memory vivid. The piano, his quiet confession, the crack in his facade. "Because for the first time in years, I heard something that felt like home," he said, his voice breaking. "Not a place I controlled, but a place I could live in." He took another step, close enough that she caught the faint scent of his cologne, cedar, crisp, grounding. "You were right, Umberly, about everything. I'm a coward. I've built walls to protect my heart, but they've become a prison. I pushed you away because I was terrified you'd hurt me." His eyes glistened, tears gathering, a sight so foreign it stole her breath. "But you didn't. You saw me, the real me, and I threw that away." Umberly's chest tightened, his words a mirror to her pain. "What changed?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, demanding truth. "You did," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You walked into my kitchen, played music that reminded me who I used to be, saw through my defenses, and found something worth caring about. I was too scared to trust it, but I know now, I knew then, that you're not like the others." He dropped to his knees, his pride abandoned, his voice raw. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Umberly. I'm asking for a chance to be the man you saw, to learn how to trust, to love without fear. I want to do it with you if you'll have me." The sight of Liam Caldwell, the Ice King on his knees, tears streaming down his face, was a seismic shift. This was the man who commanded empires, who made executives tremble, yet here he was, stripped bare, offering his heart. Umberly's throat tightened, her mind racing. She saw the boy who'd lost his mother, the man betrayed by those he trusted, the soul who'd built walls to survive. "You're proposing," she said quietly, testing the weight of his words. Liam's eyes never left hers. "I'm proposing everything. Partnership, love, a life together. I want to turn this house into a home. Fill it with music, with you, with all the messy, beautiful chaos of living." His voice cracked. "I'm more afraid of losing you than of being hurt." Umberly stepped closer, her fingers brushing his cheek, feeling the warmth beneath his tears. Do you know what I was going to do if I left? She asked. He shook his head, his breath hitching. I was going to go back to my apartment, beg the landlord to let me stay, find a job for half the pay, and pretend these weeks never happened. I was going to tell myself what I felt for you was just gratitude. She paused, her voice softening. But now I'm looking at a man brave enough to risk everything for love. Liam's eyes widened, hope flickering. Does that mean? She cut him off, her voice firm. It means I need to know this is real. That when things get hard, you'll talk to me, not shut me out. That you'll see me as your partner, not your employee. I do, Liam said, rising slowly, his voice steady now. I see you, Umberly. All of you. Your strength, your heart, the way you make beauty out of broken things. I need to know you're ready to let me love you. The man who gets lonely, who misses his mother, who's afraid he's not enough. Umberly studied him, searching for the walls that had defined him. She saw only openness, a man offering love without conditions. I'm ready, she said, stepping into his arms. Yes to everything. Partnership, love, a home. Liam held her tightly, his tears damp against her hair, his body trembling with relief. I love you, he whispered. It terrifies me, but I love you. She smiled against his chest. I love you too, Liam, even when it's scary. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the mansion's silence no longer oppressive but alive with possibility. Liam pulled back, his eyes bright. Will you play for me? Not as my manager, but as the woman I love. Umberly nodded, leading him downstairs to the piano. She played a soft melody, hopeful and sweet, each note a promise of a new beginning. Liam sat beside her, his hands joining hers, rusty but earnest, their duet filling the house with warmth. The Ice King was melting, and Umberly knew this was only the start. What does it mean to choose love over fear? Share below. Thank you for joining Umberly and Liam's unforgettable journey from suspicion to love, from icy walls to a home filled with warmth. Their story reminds us that courage and trust can transform even the coldest hearts. What did their tale spark in you? Share your thoughts on love, second chances, or overcoming fear in the comments below. We'd love to hear your reflections. Your support keeps these stories alive, so hit subscribe to catch our next tale of passion and redemption. Until then, thank you for listening, and we can't wait to meet you again in the next chapter.